financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for individual professional legal advice. The podcast information was carefully compiled from vetted sources and references. However, R.O.S.E Resources Outreach to Safeguard the Elderly cannot guarantee that you will not fall victim to a scam. Let's talk about scams. It's the must-listen show for anyone who wants to protect themselves and their loved ones from scams. Every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time on K4HD Radio, Joyce Petrowski, founder of R.O.S E, and her guests will provide valuable insights and practical tips on how to recognize and protect yourself from scams. And now, here is your host, Joyce Petrowski.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Watson. I am with R.O.S.E Resources Outreach to Safeguard the Elderly, and I have the pleasure for filling in for Joyce Petrowski today. Today's episode is called We're Not Dealing with Your Father's Scammers Anymore. And I'm going to give you a perspective of what I've seen over the last 20 or so years in the scam prevention world. I love working part-time for R.O.S.E. We have a great team, starting with Joyce. She's very passionate about preventing everyone from getting scammed. And our focus is on older adults. And then we also have an amazing board of directors and an advisory committee. And everybody is very passionate about preventing people from getting scammed. So today I'm going to fill in and share, just like you said, like I said, some of the things that I've seen over the years. So I do a lot of presentations for R.O.S.E. I've done over 70 presentations. And, scam prevention is a very heavy topic. So I try to put a little levity in my presentations. I let people know it's okay to laugh a little bit because it's a heavy topic. We talk about people losing their life savings, and it's tragic. But we want to have a little bit of humor just to lighten the mood. So I always show a picture of me from 2004. It was a picture from a small town newspaper in California. I was an IRS special agent at the time, and I did a presentation to a group of 400 people. It's hard to believe 400 people came to listen to my presentation, but I did my very best to tell them what I was seeing from a federal law enforcement perspective. So 2004, did this presentation, and my mom clipped the article. That's what moms do. They clip newspaper articles. And I actually have right here on my wall a picture. I actually have that article, and it's a picture of me from 2004. And the best part is I had no gray hair. And that always gets a laugh from my older adult audience. And the article talked about what I talked about in my presentation. And there were three things kind of that stuck out. One was identity theft. Is identity theft still a problem? Absolutely. It always will be. I talked about the Nigerian email scams, the prince that says they have some money, or someone that's is holding money from some corrupt government agency and they want to give you a little bit. And then I actually talked about phishing as well, basically fake emails trying to trick you into providing personal information. So those three scams have stood the test of time. They've been around for 20 plus years. But when I look back at that presentation from 20 years ago, things were so much simpler back then. The scammers were not very organized. And in fact, they weren't that good. A lot of times you could spot the typos, weird errors. There were too many clues. But let's fast forward to 2025. The scammers we're dealing with right now are organized. A lot of them are part of organized criminal gangs. They're well-funded. They use scripts, meaning they're like actors. They have little pieces of paper in front of them, or they have an app on their phone where they If the potential victim says this, then you say that. Um, and it's just not a fair fight. That's why I titled this, We're Not Dealing with Your Father's Scammers Anymore. They're at the next level. If you get into the ring with these folks, it is not fair. Um, and I guess the best way to describe who we're dealing with right now is these scammers are ruthless financial predators. And I don't use that term lightly. When I say predator, they're not going to physically kill you, but they will not stop until they have every penny that they can get from you. And they just don't care. A lot of these scammers are coming from other parts of the world, and they look at us Americans as, rich, lazy people sitting around doing nothing, and they don't care that they're taking um, everyone's life savings. And if you watched last week, you learn the numbers are really scary. The FBI's elder fraud report for 2024 was released, and Joyce shared those numbers. It's only getting worse. Um, so we're here today to toughen you up, to give you some information, let you know what's out there. And, we don't want anyone to get scammed. So the other thing, looking back at 20 years, so let's go back to 2004. We didn't have these things. We did not have cell phones, or smartphones at least. There were cell phones out, but basically can make phone calls and do some really low level texting. But now we all carry smartphones in our pockets or in our purse or on our wrist. Um, and basically these are portals to all of our financial information. And there's a trade-off. We can get everything we want right here, but we have to be careful because now everywhere we go, someone could be sending us a phishing email or sending us doing a smishing, sending something via text message. And then nowadays, there's so many more ways the criminals can get money from us. We have cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and other cryptos. We have Zelle, we have PayPal, we have wire transfers that are really easy, and the prepaid cards. So the criminals have much more options, and a lot of times they want to use a method that we're not used to. Like me personally, I don't own any cryptocurrency, um, but they might convince us that you need to pay that jury failure to show up for jury duty via a Bitcoin ATM. And a lot of people are like, I haven't never done that. I'm not familiar with that. So they take advantage of that uncertainty. And then fast forward 20 years to 2025, everything now requires a username and a password. Everything. I mean, there's very few things you can do now just on paper anymore. And that's tough. So we have an aging population that did not grow up with technology, combined with everything requires technology. And it's absolutely a perfect situation for the criminals. Just to give you an example, my mom recently moved to Arizona, and we had to change all of her accounts, and things like Social Security and Medicare, things like that. And everything requires a password, and you have to log in and you got to update it and this and that. It's so complicated right now. And I really feel for people who didn't grow up with technology. And so it's a perfect situation for the criminals. And then the one thing that we're very proud of at R.O.S.E is Bill on our advisory committee created something called the anatomy of a scam. And I know Joyce has highlighted it many times, but it never hurts just to quickly review it. Most scams, not all of them, but most scams follow a three-part process. So the scammers will contact you out of the blue, and that's typically via text or email or social media, things like Facebook Messenger or Words with Friends or things like that. And I'm not calling to say hi. What do scammers want to do? They want to give you a compelling reason to act. They want you to make a bad rushed decision. So they'll tell you things like, your bank account's been compromised, or there's fraud associated with your Social Security account, um, or your grandchild's in jail. Or they may come at a different angle. They may say, you've won a prize, you've won the lottery, you've won the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. But whatever method they use, they want you to not be thinking clearly. They want to either to panic or get excited. Emotions, they prey on your emotions. And then scammers will always ask for payment because that's what scammers do. Scammers want money, okay? So they're going to request payment. So back in the olden days, it was checks and cash. Things move real slow with that way. Now they have real high speed things. We have the cryptocurrency. We have the Bitcoin. We have Zelle, PayPal. We have wire transfers, prepaid cards. And I mean, the scammers will tell you to, go get Google Play cards or Apple iTunes things or anything like that, And then always with scammers, the urgency is their overarching theme. When a scammer calls you up or messages you and says, you forgot to show up for jury duty, you owe money, go down to the store, buy a prepaid card, they keep you on the phone. Okay. That's how these scams work, is urgency. They never ever say, you know what? This is a big decision. Why don't you think about it over the weekend and get back to me on Monday, and we'll talk. Or, talk to your attorney or your accountant or a good friend. No, 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 no. They never do that. They're gonna urgency is their thing. So just remember, scammers, they will lie to you and take your money. That's even the most simplest thing. If we were to do a two-part anatomy of a scam, that might be the other one. They're going to lie to you and take your money, and they will take everything. Like I said at the beginning of today's podcast, they are ruthless financial predators. They will take everything you have. So how do you protect yourself? Well, number one, you don't have to be nice. I'm giving you permission to lie to the scammers. I call it a white lie. Just say, if you're in a situation where you're on the phone, or someone's texting you and you don't like the way it's going, you can hang up. Okay. You don't have to be nice. Um, in one of the fraud prevention presentations I did recently, I did the presentation with my friend Laura, who works at a local bank. And she tells the story of a lady who was being scammed over the phone. And the lady knew she was being scammed, but she refused to hang up the phone. Why? Because she told Laura, well, I didn't want to be rude. Okay. So this lady was raised very well. Um, be nice to people on the phone. Don't hang up. Don't be rude. But it ended up costing her money. So toughen yourself up. That means you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to hang up. You're allowed to delete. Because the advice that I want to send you home today is a few things. Okay. Time is your friend. That means never feel rushed. Okay. Just the other day, my mom had a pop up on her computer that said she had viruses. And my mom paused. She didn't react. She walked away from her computer and she called me and she told me what was going on. And that's the key. She had a phone a friend. I am my mom's phone a friend. If you ever watched the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with Regis Philbin, if you didn't know the answer, there were several ways you could get help. One was polling the audience. One was doing the 50-50, where they got rid of two of the wrong answers. But my favorite one by far was having a phone a friend. So let me ask everyone out there that's watching and listening today, if you were not sure about something on your computer or your phone, who would you call? Probably a family member, a friend, a neighbor. Call the police department if you have to. But time is your friend. Don't react. Get some help, okay? And then some other advice we always are pushing is sign up for our monthly email. You just go to roseadvocacy.org. It's scrolling at the bottom of the page. And all we ask for is your name, first and last name, and your email address. and we'll send you a monthly email. And then we also send you a little a tip on Tuesday mornings. That one's a little bit shorter. And then if you like these monthly emails and the little tips on Tuesdays, share with your friends, okay? And if you don't like our emails, if you don't think they're worth your time to read them once a week, just unsubscribe. We won't have our feelings hurt. But we know we are providing good information. Share this with your friends and family, especially someone who lives alone, especially someone who is real apt to answer the phone, or just falls for things or might be a little lonely. At R.O.S E, we don't want anyone to be scammed. It breaks my heart whenever I do a presentation and someone walks up to me and tells me how they've been scammed, and it's so frustrating. It makes me angry and it makes me sad all at the same time. I've learned, I've been doing fraud prevention for about 30 years now. And what I've learned is we are never going to get rid of these scammers. It's just too profitable. We are so outnumbered, especially law enforcement, so outnumbered because it's so profitable. But we can dry up the pool of potential victims. And then the last thing I'd ask everyone out there to do, if you watch today's podcast, and this is nice and short, we're keeping it at 20 minutes today. Share this link, send it to your friends. Say, here's some common sense tips to just let them realize how good these scammers are. And that you don't want to get into the ring with them, because we're not dealing with your father's scammers anymore. Please share this link. All right, that's all I have today. Joyce will be back next week, and she's going to share a new topic, and then I'll be back later this summer with some new ideas and ways that you can protect yourself. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Well, that's all the knowledge for this episode. Tune in every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time on K4HD Radio at k4hd.com as Joyce explores a variety of knowledge so you have the power to make scam protection your healthy habit. And until then, feel free to reach out to Joyce and let's talk about scams.